I want to talk a little bit more about handling directories in Python. This is a really problematic thing. It's not going to be too big of a deal for these first few projects, but coming up later in the course, it can really make or break a project, and you can spend days and hours focused on this, and you're not making actual progress on the cool parts. So let's look at how we can work with this. So I'm dealing with the file dealing with directories in Python. A couple ways we can look at this. I've shown you a little bit already about how you can work with directories, but really the idea is that what we want to do is if I pass you a directory, I want you to go through every single item in that directory and do something with it. So I can give you a challenge. I'm going to give you a folder. I can post this on Moodle. I want to give you a folder with several different text files, and I want you to walk through each file, go through line by line of each file in this directory, and tell me how many times you see the word bunny on a single line. Writing it down so I remember. Bunny on a line. So let's see, how can we do something like that? So this, what I'm showing you with, is a little bit geared specifically for something you'll see later in the course when we are compiling JAK files into VM files. This is something you'll get into in the later project. I think this is project 10 and 11. We don't have to worry too much about that now, but I want you to be prepared for it. So we can handle individual files. This is what we've talked about before. We are going to call from the command line Python, the name of the Python file to run, and then probably some path to a file relative to the current directories. In this case, it's going to be the testing folder, the simple add folder, simpleadd.vm. So this might be an assembler, the name of the assembler. Doesn't matter. We just give this system the file. It can then work on that. We kind of know what we do there. We would know in this case if we want to translate a VM file into an ASM file at some point. So we can say what's going to be put in testing /simpleadd/simpleadd.asm. You can do the text replacement and do that. Done. So to do that in Python, it's fairly straightforward. We get the name from the command line arguments, call that VM name because it's a VM file. We're going to then split that at .vm. We want to get the leftmost portion of that, then add a .asm. So this will take a .vm file and then output to a .asm file of the same name, a suffix replacement. Suffix replacement. Replacement is up. This should be a word. Gonna go with it. Okay. The trickier part comes when we want to handle directory processing in Python. So let's say that we have a directory with multiple files that we are going to want to combine together. We have lots of files in there. We want to look at all of them, add them together, combine them to a single output. So that's what we're working towards. In this case, this assignment, I'm going to give you a bunch of text files, and I want you to find, again, how many times it says bunny. So we might have 3 or 4 files, and then each of those could say bunny, and we want to add all those together. So similar concept. Totally different thing, because why would you care about bunnies? I don't know. So when we call this, it's going to say Python, the name of the Python file, and then we'll pass it a just folder name. So testing /simpleadd. Or Python VM translator testing /simpleadd with a trailing slash. Your code is able to handle both those. If you do it by hand, it's hard, but we can use some of the OS helper functions I've shown you. Makes a big difference. So here's how we're going to handle directories in Python. We're going to use the OS package to help us out. Otherwise, it's painful. Also, that makes it so that your code can run in Windows, Mac, Linux, toasters, whatever, assuming it has Python. So we get the directory name from the command line arguments and assign that to a variable. We're going to split that. Now what that will yield should be testing and simple add without the trailing slash. If there was a trailing slash when we passed a name to it, we will just get testing /simple add and then nothing. So that's kind of awkward. So we need to check and see that if our name, this second part right here, If that is empty, we want to split it again so that we can break it apart into everything up to, and then that just last part by itself of our path to the file name. So if the name is empty, then we want to split it again and do the same thing. But now instead of splitting dir name, we're splitting the path. You've seen this. I've shown you this. Now what we can do is we have our directory we care about, and we can join that. So we have os.path.join, path and the name, and we have the ASM or whatever output file we want to write to, os.path.join, path, name, name.asm. So for instance, if we are compiling simple add, we would want to create simple add.asm. I might ask you to give a directory with the name bunny and output into that bunny.txt inside. The way you can do that. That way, if I give you a directory name called rabbits, you could then write to rabbits.txt. Don't know why I'm going for those. Hares next. We're going to do rabbits, bunnies, and hares. After you have your directory with all the source files, got that. Then you also know that there are multiple files in that directory, so what we want to do is just go through every file in a directory. How do we go through every file in a directory? We get Python to help us out. So we are concerned in this particular project with all the files that end in .vm. You might be concerned that all files that end in .txt and don't care about ones that end in .text. I don't know why. Here's what we do. For f in os.list directory, os.listdir. For f in os.listdir, and we're going to want to look into the source directory, which we just defined. So we want to go through every file in there. If the current file ends with .vm, good, we want to process that. We can then say we're processing it, get a class going, get a parser going, whatever we want to do. If it does not end in .vm, or the ending we care about, we just ignore it and go on. So that way we walk through every single line, or every single file in a directory. So we've seen how we can deal with a single file by itself that comes in as a command line argument, and a directory full of files that we might want to care about, but we only might care about a few that end in a certain line ending. Good to go. Let's just combine those. So we're going to have a main function. We're going to get the name from the command line arguments, and we just need to check on if this is a directory, we can do one thing, handle a directory. Otherwise, if it's a single file, we can handle that. All right, start putting in our code. How do we handle a single file? Well, in this case, we said asm file equals vm name.split plus asm, and we can process that. We saw that above. How do we handle a directory? We can make a handle directory function which has that code that we literally just had up above. We can create this here. So eventually it gets down to we're processing a file. We're processing a file. The only difference in here in the directory and single files is that for this directory we're concerned with writing to a single file, and in the handle file we're just writing one file as well based on what that is named. I know that's confusing, and you can forget the last 10 seconds of that and come back to this video when you get to these later projects. It'll kind of make a little bit more sense. So far so good. The last part of it is just getting our weird magic to then call our main function, and then depending if it is a single file or directory, we can run some of this code. We split this apart. The last job would be to have a process function that would take a file, do whatever we need to do. So let's say take a file, count the number of times it says bunny, write that to a file that we pass to it, or increment that, whatever. And then later projects will be take a file, go through and see what code is in it, emit that as some assembly, and then put that into a common assembly file. So there you go. This is the final program. This is not complete because process is not defined as a function. You'd have to make some sort of class or function that will do that for you. But from there, combine it, and you're kind of good to go. So that is taking a command line argument, dealing with either a single file or a directory, walking through every file in a directory, and then we can emit that to some other common file. These are the big mistakes. You can get through this and handle it, you're going to be so good. I'll get into the bunny assignment and go from there.